Sivile, our expert, and then also in the hub we have our IT, Kote, and our coordinator, Etambuyu. And we're privileged to have our HNP students who have come to join us this afternoon. Thank you very much for coming through and being with us today. And we want to welcome everyone that is in the network. That we have quite a number of people. Thank you for joining us. And we have different institutions that have joined us. I can see Cabo Central. I can see Ndola College of Nursing. Thank you for joining us. And quite a number of people. Thank you very much. I can't manage to go through and just welcome everyone, but just know that we recognize you and acknowledge your presence on this platform. So this afternoon, we'll be looking at an interesting session that will just set the tone for us as a program. And to do that, we'll have Dr. Sivile share his thoughts around what the program is will be doing this year, and highlighting key issues from the National HIV Guidelines, which have been were launched last year. And these will be shared in an electronic format, and printing copies will be shared throughout as we get partner support for their printing. So that being said, please make sure you remain muted. And if you have anything to say, just put it in the chat. And then please reach out, go into a link in the chat and register your name. Remember that with each registration, we're improving and we'll be able to give you a feedback as proof for your HPCZ point allocation. So just make sure you register on that link, and then we'll be able to take note of your name. So thank you very much. That being said, I'll now hand this over to Dr. Sivile.
Yeah, good afternoon, network. Happy New Year to all of you, and I hope you enjoyed your festive season. So we are going to look at the guidelines. Obviously, this is not an in-depth discussion. It's just an overview of what is in there, what is to expect. And also in-depth discussions will be done at the time of the dissemination of the guidelines, which we are going to discuss with time. So next slide. So this is more or less what is new in the guidelines. We are going to discuss most of these. Some of these things are familiar to all of us. Next slide. So the principles on the development of the recommendations, mostly it was consensus by the Guidelines Development Committee. This committee comprises of members from MOH, members from implementing partners, specialists in the field. And so the consensus is typically based on program priorities, what individuals in the program and implementing HIV services in the country thinks are important things. Also, evidence is very important, it's evidence-based. We look at international and also local evidence. We also look at programmatic data to recommend some of the things. So we refer also to international guidelines as well. Recommendations, typically it's the WHO and the Americans and the European guidelines, HIV guidelines, cost effectiveness and impact, scalability as well. We look at, can these things be done? So be assured that most of the things that we've put here can be done. Equity as well. You see, that's why we started looking at other special populations, which we think have been left behind. So in HIV testing services, The recommendations, obviously, the important recommendation is universal routine HIV testing and linkage to services. So here, the Ministry of Health, in these guidelines, still recommend that we should have universal HIV testing. And here, everybody who comes to the service, the sick service, should be offered an HIV test. This can also be done via an HIV screening tool, which you find, but this recommendation is not new, but it's a very important recommendation even where we are. We still have to do test, especially for those priority populations like the children. Targeted testing, that's index testing, and also other forms like you find in these guidelines, social network testing, those are emphasized. Use of a screening tool for adults and not for children. Self-testing is recommended, including self-testing for, provider-assisted self-testing for children. And also a NAT test at 9 months. Recense testing will still be done on protocol-based in selected facilities. The changes that you find in the guidelines now, it is recommended that recency test result should be sent back to the facility for action. Yeah, so all facilities, I know some of the facilities have already started receiving the recency test results. Next slide. So this is just the evidence that we have, and we are glad that this study was partially done in Zambia and Kenya for the caregiver-assisted HIV self-testing for children. And so this is really where an HIV self-test kit is given to a caregiver. This can be a biological or non-biological caregiver, and they're supposed to go do an HIV test at their home. So the target population is children 18 to 14 years old, and the test obviously will be done at home. We don't encourage the so-called facility-based assisted self-testing. This should be done in the community, in the homes, to increase access for HIV testing for children. Where possible, caregiver who receives the test kit must be followed up for the usage of the test kit. So it's encouraged that, especially for the children, that facilities that will be doing this, they really do follow up to see that this was done and the result is known. Like all self-testing kit, this is a screening test, so the usual confirmatory test must be done. So we do have, I think, strong evidence. This is an abstract which was presented at IS last year. You can see that Ministry of Health participated, and we know that this test is actually it does help with the return of results. It's acceptable, and there is some form of impact. You can see the number over there. Next slide. So this is a major recommendation. With regards to prevention, HIV prevention, the recommendations are the same, and you can see they're getting more and more in the guidelines. Reason being, this is what we think should be the the axis of our programming. So we've introduced some new things like long-acting injectables. That's a Caregiver for PrEP, and linkage to care or preventive services for HIV negative patients. This is recommended, and the recommendation is we should have a lot of innovations here and have these services done even in point of care that are not typically haven't been using these services. Places like the family planning, MCH and so on. We need to have HIV prevention services. PrEP is a cornerstone for our HIV prevention, but other points, interventions are still encouraged. Next slide. So this is just to remind everybody that from the ZDHS, it shows that we can do better in terms of HIV prevention, especially for that age group 18 to 24 years old. We know the data that over 70% of the new infections in that age group, and most of those are actually females. So really, we recommend social network testing, PrEP for this age group, some interventions which are empowering, like the dreams, collaborating with other, service, other line ministries. So we will have a lot to say as we go in the program concerning this issue. Next slide. So WHO recommended the Kabele, and in Zambia, we've also recommended this and adopted it as an extra method for the prevention. Next slide. So this is the evidence which all of us, we should be familiar with, but a meta-analysis of most of these trials that you can see over there. Some of them done like the HPTN or 084 was actually, Z3, which was actually done in Kenya. So we do have that representation of our region. So we know that the efficacy is found that there's almost 80% reduction of the risk of acquisition of HIV. This is compared to oral PrEP. So we know oral PrEP, when we are compliant, the efficacy for prevention can go up to 90% and even higher. But comparing oral PrEP and injectables, there's that 80%, it's 80% better. So really, it's a very efficacious intervention which we need to adopt. Just to say that the commodities, we anticipate that they'll be in the country by April this year. Ministry of Health is acquiring this, and we've started the preparatory phase in terms of training, SOP, selection, of facilities and population who should be receiving these commodities and the target population. So extra instructions or documents through memos or revision of the PrEP guidelines will be done to just look at this particular program issue. Next slide. Oral PrEP, there will be some advances in oral PrEP as well. Now we don't require a baseline creatinine. I think we've been using oral PrEP for some time. We know that it's pretty much safe. And also that preloading for 21 days in females, it's just 7 days what you find in the guidelines for all populations. So not that. And there's an emphasis in the guidelines, this PrEP should be really, really given to adolescent girls and young women when we find them, and those breastfeeding, pregnant and breastfeeding women. So these are special populations that we want to be given PrEP. Next slide. That's in keeping with the other serodiscordants and other key POPs, the MSNs, female sex workers, and the like. HIV treatment and care. Again, the recommendation, the top one is the treat all or test and treat. So irregardless of the CD4 count, everyone who's found positive should be treated, and same day treatment of initiation of ART is recommended. DTG-based regimens are recommended for all adults and also children. For the PDTG, above 4 weeks and 3 kgs should be on those commodities. Genotype testing after treatment failure, especially for those on DTG and PIs, is recommended. And as you know, we are now using darunavir for our second line ART. Next slide. So we've done well in DTG scale up. We are now over, is it Dr. 80% of the target?
Over 80%
of the target. Yeah, so we can we need to appreciate, I think in just over a year. Next slide. And thanks to all of you who've been working. So we still recommendation that when you're switching patients from other commodities to DTG, you don't need that viral load test. And we have evidence that that is secure from our own Vicent here that we've done in Zambia and also elsewhere in Nadia. And really the main recommendation is to phase out favirenz or NNRTIs from our program. So you find that particular recommendation. Next slide. So this is what I was talking about. So we really don't expect patients to be started on a favirenz or nevirapine-based regimen because of the high resistance that we have from our HIV drug resistance survey we did in 2019 to 2020. We should be repeating this study this year, unless you have these exceptional circumstances, but really something that we don't recommend in these guidelines. So let's try and phase out patients who are still on these molecules. Let's move them. This time around, you don't even need a viral load. This is for nevirapine still, except the first 2 weeks of life. So we are introducing, or we introduced darunavir for second line. It's the best in the class of PIs. We've talked about this, why we think this is better. And right now, we are really encouraging all those that are failing first line, DTG-based first line throughout the country should be started on darunavir. Let facilities start ordering. We have some target facilities where we've pushed this commodity, but now it's open for all facilities. We are encouraging particularly the pediatric, the adolescent patients that are on PIs like lopinavir and so on. Those should be switched, all of them, to darunavir based because of it's more tolerable. So let's do that. I'm sure we've all seen the memos. Teams going around in facilities encouraging that this work is done. So this is for everybody. Those failing second line, first line, second line should constitute of darunavir, ritonavir. For pediatrics and adolescent patients who are on lopinavir based and they are above 40 kgs, they should be transitioned from other PIs to darunavir-based regimens. Next slide. So I think we've talked about this. So for adults failing, watch out for TB. If there's no TB, you give, and darunavir is available, you give darunavir. If they have TB, you still go ahead and give lopinavir. Next slide. So this is our optimization of ART regimens, where we are. You can see this is the table you find in the guidelines. It is now simplified. Children 0 to 4 weeks, AZT3TC nevirapine. If you don't have this expert opinion, we do have local studies that have interesting evidence. So the experts will work on that. But for pretty much children, adolescents, and adults, DTG-based regimen. That's what you need to start them on optimization. And you can see that even on alternative regimens, we don't have a favirenz-based regimen as alternatives. Like I've said, the desire is to phase out that particular molecule. So where you can't give DTG, you can give a PI, either lopinavir or darunavir as an option for those that are maybe intolerant or for some other reason, you can't give them DTG. There's a note at the bottom. When you have a few changes on TAF, now TAF has been approved for use in pregnancy. So this is different from what you find in the previous guidelines. So you can safely give TAF in pregnant women, and we know who is supposed to be prioritized for TAF. Men above the age of 50, female above the age of 45, those who have creating clearance below 50 but above 30, with some CKD or maybe with some proteinuria or bone disease. And we expect that in all your facilities, those on first line, about 20 to 25% of your population should be on TAF-based regimen. So we expect that that transition is done as well as we are optimizing these regimen for ART. Next slide. So this is second line, speaks for itself. We really don't expect people to be coming from a 5-year base. There should be very few those who started BTG based and so on and so forth. But really, everybody that is failing TLD or TAFED should be put on AZT3TC and Darunava. I think that's our message. Next slide. Monitoring of HIV patients on ART. You know, we've introduced the baseline viral load testing for all populations starting treatment. Transitioning should be regardless of the viral load test, like we've mentioned before. We still insist that for pregnant women, pregnant and breastfeeding women, the viral load test should be done every 3 months. Viral load monitoring is the preferred method for monitoring viral load on ART. Genotype testing for those failing PI and LPV and DTG-based regimen. Now, I just wanted to emphasize for CD4 testing, the CD4 testing in these guidelines has been reserved for the identification of advanced HIV disease. So all those that are initiating care are the ones that need the CD4 count test. All those that are admitted or they are ill or they are re-initiating care, and those who have high viral loads. So we've targeted the CD4 or quantified for the CD4 for those particular populations. Those who could have had even a low CD4 count, but they've attained consistent high viral load suppression twice, you can still discontinue CD4 monitoring as long as the patient is suppressed. Next slide. So we've said so much on the baseline viral load, and these are the reasons to track silent transfers, recent testing for quality improvement, and also clinical utility. I know some facilities have started receiving these results and you are collecting things. I think we reached maybe about 30–40% last year of the new clients having this test done from our DISA records. So it should be done as part of the safety labs. We still don't recommend that if the patient is found to be a silent transfer by a suppressed viral load, they should not be recorded. They should still go ahead and be recorded, but interviewed as a patient. In terms of whether they are coming from another facility, so that reconciliation of this data is done. Next slide. Continuity of care, retention in care is an important one. So here, further guidance will be given as we are studying the situation and having extra other interventions. So the key is we still have to classify loss to follow-up as those that intermittent treatment interruption. We still put it at 30 days, or is it 28 days, depending on whether you're looking at weekly or the calendar. But the important part is to have somebody to look at these numbers, which I know some facilities are doing. but extra information of what these people should be doing or teams will be done. We've been doing very well in terms of tracing these patients who miss appointments immediately within 24 hours. That is done. And also, one of the new things that you find in the guidelines is those that are returning to care, they need to be, there's even a chapter of the so-called returning to care, what needs to be done. So we want screening of TB, screening of OIs, finding out why they lost, but also the services for those returning to care should be very friendly, non-judgmental, and the like. So you find this component of what you do for patients who are returning to care in this guideline. So it's one addition that wasn't there previously. Recording of the transouts. So what's been happening is that patients are just recorded as transouts, but are never recorded as trans-in, or we do not know if they ever arrive elsewhere. So we have the high rates in our data, national data of transouts, and very few trans-in. Pretty much for every 100 transouts, we only have 25 trans-in if we look at the data, somewhere there, 25, 30. So because of this, the instruction is that, or the recommendation is, you should only recommend somebody as a trans out once you have confirmation of them having arrived and registered as at the facility where they were being transferred to, as opposed to the time they've just left. You record them as trans out. So a recording of trans out should be accompanied by a confirmation of a trans-in. Otherwise it remains or will be counted as a lost follow-up if they are over that period. In this regard, the program desires to have a master registry for all patients, which will be used for assessing the so-called silent transfers who are moving from facility to facility. This should be done before the end of Q2 of this year. Comorbidities. TB, still an important one, reminding people that ART should be started in all TB patients, regardless of CD4 count, and within 2 weeks. Others will know that the practice has been to wait. That is wrong. The guidelines are clear on this issue. I think other issues in terms of TB treatment they are the same. The new thing you find is COVID, bidirectional screening for COVID and TB, especially in these HIV patients. So all facilities, HIV providing facilities, should have capacity to screen for COVID and also to provide IPC facilities or services or arrangements in these facilities. So those are the two key things, because we know from even the data here from Zambia that those who have HIV and low CD4 counts have adverse outcomes from SARS-CoV-2 infection. And you know that we are, these waves, they continue to come. We are almost in some elevation of some sort of cases at the moment. Emphasis on CVD, on cardiovascular diseases and other NCDs is still critical in these guidelines. So there are some things that have been added for TB, like computer-aided diagnostic and the use of CRPs. So I'm sure the TB program will pick this and do further trainings and rollout of these modalities. But these are in the guidelines, especially for our HIV population, because you know that TB diagnosis in HIV, it's mostly post-bacillary, and sometimes the presentation is atypical. So these are the new things to just aid us with case identification for tuberculosis in HIV patients. So CRP will be used as a biomarker. Obviously, there's a bit of debate, but WHO has recommended this. And in our discussion, we feel this is quite helpful because we just want to identify as more CD4, TB patients as possible. Next slide. COVID and HIV, I think I have referred to this already. We know that, and this is what we've noted even from this particular surge, that we have that there's been a lot of nosocomial COVID-19 infections. So typically hospitals are notorious for COVID-19 transmission. So we, and our HIV, they have that frequent visitation to facilities. And so infection prevention and screening should be a priority for COVID in the ART centers. So you screen symptomatically. Anyone who has a symptom should have a test done and that OPD. So our current screening algorithm guideline is all symptomatic patients are screened and all admissions are actually screened. Contacts of positives should be also have a test done. We are not doing tests for everybody that works in OPD, but everybody, or in ART clinic, but everybody that is admitted should have that test done. So in ART, it's that symptomatic screening. Or everybody who has even a hint of a COVID symptom should get a test done, even if it's just fatigue, which is a symptom. Remember that there are other things, TB, malaria, and so on, that can have similar presentations. So pretty much, this is the algorithm for CRP. We know the cutoff point. If it's elevated, you decide to do a TB test with a gene expert. STIs and HIV, this is an area of interest for the program, both for the sake of outcomes and also risks for HIV acquisition to those that are negative. That's why we are interested. But the main issue is that STIs prevalence, incidence in Zambia has shown to be getting up a little bit. And so we need to start working much harder. And these two go together. Risk factors for the acquisition of HIV and STIs are the same. And remember that STIs are even higher, for key populations like FSWs, MSMs, and so on. So for programs that are dealing with these particular subsets of patients, we recommend routine screening, annual screening for STIs, especially common ones like syphilis. For those populations that are really at risk, like FSWs, even annual empiric treatment should be done if you can't do the test. But that is not a very low, it's more of condition or a suggestion that you should consider it as well when you can. But the recommendation is annual screening for these populations. Next slide. STIs, obviously we've maintained the so-called syndromic screening, where especially in those high-risk populations with sexual practices, and I've mentioned the target populations, and it's recommended to institute some preventive measures for these populations as well, like condoms, for STIs, even if we are giving PrEP, annual periodic serology test for asymptomatic syphilis infection can be offered to these high-risk populations. HIV positive FSW and other high-risk individuals in settings with limited clinical services may have a periodic presumptive treatment for asymptomatic syphilis. And obviously an emphasis to do these tests, especially in the antenatal care. So we really need to work hard to start attending to these STIs. Next slide. There's consideration for special populations. And here, typically, we've identified our migrant populations. Now, for most of you who might be in a sub-national level districts, so when we say migrant populations, obviously we mean typical ones like truck drivers, but there are also traders, people who go to buy maize, fishermen, and things like that. So our small, anecdotal analysis have shown that this is a big driver for especially districts that we've identified as hotspots. These are either districts that have got truckers or fishermen, fishing population or fish traders, that sort of thing, or also those who go to buy harvests, whatever form of harvest from the villages, and they exchange with some they trade with clothes and other things. So these are migrant populations that are moving from one place to another. We recommend that attention is given to these. They do have challenges as they are moving for HIV services, trackers, traders, fishermen, and so on. Let's take services, both preventive and treatment services to them. We need to protect their rights. We do have foreigners that are engaged in this. Our MOUs with neighbors is that HIV services can be provided equitably for free, even for them. Tailor-made testing services should be done, and treatment services, some DSDs for these populations, and also preventive services should be done. I think all of us, when we read these guidelines, they are not so prescriptive, but the message is what are the facilities, districts, so on, doing concerning trackers, doing concerning migrants, doing concerning, traders who move, doing concerning fishermen. There are provinces like Northern Province where we've been identifying more new patients than targets. The reason we are getting from the provincial health office is because of those fishing camps where they are churning out huge numbers for these populations. I think it's not enough to know that this is where the problem is, but what are we doing? How do we tailor-make services for these populations, including those who do these, migratory or I don't know what to call them, markets that move from one village to another. Those should have, we need to find ways of giving services to them. So lastly, I just wanted to talk about HIV programming. And when we'll be doing the rollouts of these guidelines, there will be a session on, customer care, some slides. So our services should be not patient, but Person-centered, I think we'll have to change that. Person-centeredness to allow for the delivery of care based on people's needs, preferences, clinical characteristics, and their context. So this is key population, key recommendations. How do we make our services person-centered? We need to diversify these interventions. We can't keep them in facilities. They need to go to communities. We still promote health posts, you know, the so-called Circle of Hope model. Special considerations for priority and key populations should be made for all facilities. I know we have key pop sensitivity trainings in some facilities. That's the way to go, because we need to attend to that last group of patients that are not, you know, we haven't reached. Task shifting and investment in staff training is key. And here you'll find in the guidelines, we recommend that all staff should be involved in the trainings. M&D people, you know, other staff, support staff should be involved in trainings. These are staff that we've been leaving behind for our services. So service delivery should be across the whole HIV continuum of care. We should be able to do all facilities, viral load testing and so on. But the most important area of service that facilities are not involved in programming is prevention. So facilities should ask themselves, what are you doing as a facility in preventing these services? As your, you know, your CBVs go to test, do they go also, because they do go in the community for index testing and whatever, how strong is their prevention services? You know, do they go sometimes just for prevention services? Your linkage with other arms of the program that deal with prevention, like the PACAs and the DACAs in the facility. You know that the agenda for the Ministry of Health is decentralization. So those arms from the local government facilities, how are we engaging ourselves in our programming with them to ensure that the whole continuum of care and prevention is attended to? Yeah, so monitoring for patients cannot be emphasized. Our M&D, and here the emphasis, you know that we want to move to the EMR platform as ministry, but the quality of some of the data that we have in our smart care is very incomplete. So a call to take that particular issue very serious, to complete this particular area of our programming, the M&D. Let's ensure that we do not tick just the dispensation so that the treatment car is okay. Let's finish these records in our smart care so that our data quality can be fine. Next slide. So when do you get the guidelines? So first week, we'll have a training of trainer in Lusaka, training of trainers of all provinces this time around. I think the national level, we plan to just end our trainings or supervisory trainings at provincial level, where others from districts and so on will be trained. Later on, implementing partners-driven credit should be done at facility and district level. And we know that all the implementing partners do have funding for trainings. And so between February and the end of April, we hope that all facilities are reached with both comprehensive trainings and also just orientations in the new guidelines. We know we have plenty of new stuff around, so some will need the comprehensive guidelines. So the slide sets will be typically different for those for the comprehensive and for the orientation, which will take a very short period of time for the orientation. Next slide. So really, the rest of the issues will be discussed comprehensively when we'll be doing the training of trainers and also the districts or facility level trainings where the answers will be, the discussions for, specific issues will be done. But otherwise, this should give us the direction where we feel the program should be going. I know some time from now we'll have a presentation of priorities, but this should also just show you that we want the programming and the guidelines should be responsive to the problems that we are facing. So thank you for listening to me. Over to you, Dr. Ziambo.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sivile. I think you need that water. You've been talking for quite a bit, and thank you very much. So to our network, we do thank you for joining us. I've seen a few comments and questions, but I would like to give the opportunity to people to be able to raise their hands and ask their question. So this is the time that you can feel free and ask a question. So IT, kindly assist with muting people so that we can quickly unmute. So Bonnie, please unmute yourself, then make your questions or comment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Sivile, for the presentation. It was quite informative. Now, on the issue of phasing out NVP and EFV, and on the treatment recommendations, we are saying we are still maintaining for the pediatrics to receive NVP combination. Then also looking at the prevention, still for these peds that are exposed, we are still giving NVP. So are there any plans that going forward probably might see another drug that won't be among the ones that we are phasing out completely? Because I believe that when we are phasing out, at the end of the day, probably in the facilities, you remain with nothing with regards to NVP and EFV in that regard. That's my concern.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, for worrying about the little ones. And I know Sivile will push it to me.
Dr. Ziambo, you can go ahead and answer the question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so I think the decision about nevirapine really has been constrained by the availability of new molecules that are safe and can be useful for the children that are lower at that weight and that age. And so far, we don't have any new molecules or products on the market that have been considered safe to be used in that age. So we're definitely looking forward to any research work that is going on that will get us some molecules that can be used at that age. And then we'll be able to roll it out in a very systematic manner without any shortages. I hope that response will suffice.
Yeah, so just in addition, there was that study, I think people, unveiled a few months where they were using one molecule. So
yes. Yeah.
So there've been some studies to see, okay, can you spare, some of these drugs use one, and it was in a way effective. But to tell you the truth, I think the whole HIV community, what we are looking forward to is the use of long-acting injectables for these children. There's some ongoing research, international research in that space to see if you can use our cabeles and so on, you can give these children a jab at the beginning and forget about it, as prophylaxis. So I think that's where the future is and where the efforts are being made. So sooner or later, I think that's where we'll find ourselves. So that should be exciting. We know that will be very, very efficacious.
Thanks for that additional comment. I saw a hand before. Yeah, Nambela, you can unmute yourself and then make your comment. Then Martha Nkoma can follow through later.
Yes, Doc. If I got you clearly about checking of the CD4, you said you've reserved it for baseline, those who are sick, and the other category. But my question was, how do we know which patients need Septrin, or how do we stop Septrin on our old clients? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nambela. Martha, would you like to ask your question before we respond to that one? I know you raised your hand, but you've dropped it. Okay. Then let's have Munkombwe.
Yes, thank you so much. And actually, thanks for the guidelines. I'm coming from Wapula province and Action HIV. And I think we are also one of the most hit in terms of migrant populations. Considering for very stable clients, are we considering extending more than MMSD6? And then I think there are a number of questions in the chat box that I think are where they respond, which I may also want to ask. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Munkombwe. All the way from Wapula, we appreciate your connecting and interacting with us. Dr. Sivile, would you like to pick those two questions?
So for a question from Wambanji on the CD4, very good question, actually. So in the guidelines, it's still clear that for Septrin, you want those who have CD4 count below 350 consistently. Yeah, but what we are really saying is for the patients that are suppressed, for instance, somebody's suppressed and they've been on treatment for 2-3 years, is stable patients, there might be no need for both Septrin and also CD4 count monitoring. The guidelines are clear that you still need to do that CD4 count, but the prioritization for the CD4 count would like it to be for the advanced HIV disease. For children and pregnant women, you know that you don't need a CD4 count for the Septrin prophylaxis. And yes, it's still clear that you need that CD4 count. Why I wanted to stress this point is going forward, this year we will not have the machines. We'll be using most of the point of care tests for CD4 count. 100% will be point of care tests for CD4 count. The PIMAs and the DCT. So the recommendation is let's first target for the identification of advanced HIV disease. Yeah. And MMD from Mr. Mukombwe for 1 year. So that request, we've thrown it to the ESG sub-technical working group. We know that some countries internationally, I think there's a trial in Malawi looking at that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll wait to see what they will recommend. the DSD task force. For now, we don't have it as a recommendation for more than 6 months.
Thank you very much. I'll ask about Doug, Martha, and Paul in that order to make their comments and questions.
Thank you, Doc. I'm Douglas Sinjani. I'm from Nakonde. I just need clarity for me, just a clarity on where the doc was talking about starting ART in TB patients. I don't know, maybe I missed him. I don't know if he said it's safe to start maybe all the two drugs at the same time, the ART and the TB drugs. Maybe I just need some clarity on that one.
That's noted. Thank you. Martha?
Good afternoon, network. Okay, so my question is, how best can we be helped as a network in terms of the turnaround time for the results, mostly for NAT and genotype? Because I realized to say it is taking forever and the follow-up is becoming really difficult to that regard. I submit.
Where are you from, Martha? Martha?
Martha, would you like to just advise which province you're coming from and facility? Okay, we seem to have lost her. Paul, just a moment before you can respond to that, Dr. Sivile.
Yes.
Good afternoon, team. So this is Paul from Copper Belt Province, Mwale here. So I think my first question has been tackled by Martha, which is on genotype, which is the turnaround time for genotype. So my question comes through because of where Dr. Sivile, your slide said that we need to do genotype whenever there's actually treatment failure. So the next question is that do we need to change or to switch somebody from this regimen to another one after the genotype results are actually out? And then if so, what is the National HIV Program doing in improving the turnaround time? Do we intend to improve the testing centers for this very important test? I submit. Thank you.
Dr. Sivile, I think you have 3 questions. Thank you so much, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Doug. A very good question. So this is our recommendations. If someone has TB and HIV, not on treatment, you start with a TB treatment. I know the guidelines and some partners say you can give both the TB and the ART the same day. That can be done. There's no real problem with that. But the recommendation is start with the TB, give the ART within 2 weeks, not at 14 days, no. Within 2 weeks. That within 2 weeks should mean it can be the same day, it can be at day 2, day 3, and day 4, day 5. Mostly because you are just trying to see if somebody would tolerate the TB treatment, say they'll have, reactions like, anaphylaxis, skin reactions, and that sort of thing, which should take place within 2-3 days. So typically by day 5, day 6, day 7, you should have, depending on when you started and how your appointment systems are arranged, within a week, we recommend that the ART should be started. If the patient does not seem as a high risk, you think the tolerability will be fine, they are not wasted and that sort of thing, you can start the TB and the HIV treatment the same day. But the recommendation is within 14 days. And we encourage to start them as soon as possible. The so-called rapid initiation, which is within a week as a definition of rapid initiation of ART. So, and the common question is that then when do you start the Septrin? If they recommend, you can start the Septrin after another week. There's no rush to start everything the same day, unless it's somebody maybe who's admitted and so on, who you can monitor for reactions. Martha, turnaround time for NAT and EID, I'm surprised that facilities are still complaining. I would like to know where you are. So, of course, we know that in most of the facilities, it's within 2 weeks you are having that NAT and EID. But for those facilities that don't have access to a PCR, closer, in our plan, what is there is the point of care tests. That's GeneXpert and the PIMA for EID. So we do have a plan of facility. That's why I really wanted to know which facility that is. We've mapped some facilities that need these point of care tests. And I know some of you on this platform have those point of care tests for EID. So if you have a point of care test in your district, it should be done maybe within a day or two. You have your results depending on how you've arranged with the lab people. So the GeneXperts are actually doing these tests, and we have quite a number of them throughout the country. So you can just write in the chat where you are and how long the EID takes, so that I can look at that list, whether the facility is on that list that we've mapped. For the genotype, so there are two things. Previously, we had a bit of trouble in the last 2 years or so because of the COVID. Then when we started doing the test, we were not doing the instis, amplifying them. Now, within the last 1 month, we are now doing that. We are able to do all the tests. So the challenge has been on the provision. How do we send the results back? We've created a platform which can be accessed for these results, www.DISA, and there's some people who will give credentials so that they can access where these results will be sitting. So the issue has been testing in the lab, but even when the test is done, how is that result transmitted back to the facility or to the person who requested? So the mechanism we have for sending back results, it's a cloud platform now, and credentials have been given to the provincial laboratory specialists. So they'll go in and see if that result is available. Our intention for genotype is to have results ready within 4 weeks.
Thank you very much. I'll just quickly run through. I know I've seen quite a number of hands here, and there were some comments earlier on the chats. Just hold on for a little one so that I can read some comments on the chat so that people don't feel ignored. There's a concern, Dr. Sivile, here that some people are using TB-LAM more than GeneXpert for TB screening. Is it okay for this test to be used routinely, interchangeably for TB? TB-LAM versus GeneXpert. The other question, the 1-year ART drug dispensation has been answered. And then there was an appeal that we should include the HIV nurse practitioners during the orientation and trainings. And I think this has been noted. Then no outline for third line management for special reasons. There's a request here. We didn't emphasize in these updates. Then there was a concern here, trans out versus trans in clients. What form of evidence, slips, or any tool that can be used as evidence the trans out client has reported to the facility where the client was gone, apart from the short dispensation in a rural setup? So I think there's just some SOP of some sort in how to manage this process. Maybe you can respond to those.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Ziambo, and thanks, colleagues, for those tests. So the LAM and the gene expert, I've noticed this as well. A very good practice, though it's overdone, that people are adopting, or is it over-adopting the use of the LAM test, which is really a good thing, and it's encouraged. But what we are saying is once a LAM test is done, it's positive, you still go ahead and do a gene expert test. The reason is LAM can pick even environmental, mycobacteria. So mycobacteria that really is not the cause of TB can cause the LAM to be positive. So you need the gene expert, which is very specific, but also the gene expert gives you the advantage of knowing whether it's resistant or not. That given, even if both the LAM and the gene experts are positive, you still want to do the sputum AFDs because that will help you to know whether someone is clearing or not after 2 months, if you can go and continue with the continuation phase. So what I'm saying is, I think the issue has been in once a LAM is positive, there's no attempt to proceed to do the other tests. So I think we've got a lot of TSS and teaching that we need to do. Probably we need to make that stronger in our materials when people are doing the how to use the LAM and so on. We'll make it a bit stronger.
Yeah. And when to use it as well.
Yes.
Sometimes you don't use it in the criteria, according to the criteria. Who's supposed to use it?
So you have to give in the severely immunosuppressed, those below 200. That's been our guide, and let's stick to that test. Third line, I'm afraid that is in the advanced HIV guidelines. I don't know when we're going to review those. So we didn't revise anything on third line other than how to do the transfers and so on and referrals for third line services. Turnaround, trans in and trans out issues, how do you communicate? I've seen Dr. Bosco on the call. He can help advise what we are doing in terms of just how does one facility ensure that the patient who transited out has reached. So they are working on what is called a direct facility directory. Dr. Bosco, please ask your question and answer the question on facilities. How do they link to each other?
Happy New Year, Dr. Bosco.
We can unmute Dr. Bosco.
You can unmute.
I should have been on the experts.
All right, thank you very much. Happy New Year, Dr. Sivile and Dr. Ziambo. Very good presentation. On the issue of trans out, trans in, there are two scenarios. The first one is a transfer out who being transferred from facility A to facility B with drugs. I can say MMS, MMD. if it's 6 months drug, that patient will still remain in your care as long as he's having drugs with him. Because if you close the chapter in your facility has been transferred out, the patient will remain, I can say, on the air or in the community for 6 months, and he will not be a transient somewhere. So you lose the patient in facility A, but facility B will not receive any patient. So we are encouraging a collaboration as it is now, that when you are transferring such patient, keep that patient in your system as your patient because he has drugs. And we want also people to be proactive by, as you are transferring your patient out, get the details where the patient is going and proactively communicate with that facility to verify if the patient have reached there, so that when the patient reaches there and is confirmed, that patient will be confirmed as a transient, then you are going to transfer out your patient in the system. There's more guidance in the EMIRA, the version 261, which is the current EMIRA. If you go on page 159, it is well simplified that it must be confirmed for this to be called a transfer out. In the same EMIRA, if you go in the last page, which is page 260, there is a Appendix J. I mentioned those simple pages. Appendix J also give us how we qualify those transfer out. So we want at provincial level, each province should have the directory, like we have in Southern Province, Western Province, and those are CDC supported provinces. And we want countrywide to have those directories so that we know each patient where they are going, their phone number, so that when we are transferring, it is easy to check in the system to know that this is a patient who's going to facility B, and we can easily contact facility B to verify on the state of that patient. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bosco. Did you have a comment or question that led you to raise your hand?
No. For me to just to appreciate, this is wonderful presentation from Sivile and yourself. I'm glad. I think we don't need even that 1 week orientation, maybe in the first week of February. And in addition to that, there is a guideline soft copy. Let me take this advantage. There is a soft copy of 2022 guideline which circulated in the social media. Please, that one, it is not a correct version. People should not consider it because it is not signed by the minister. We will release the official guideline shortly or soon. So the one to circulate in social media is not the correct version. Thank you.
Thank you for making that clarification, Dr. Bosco.
Thank you. So Dr. Bosco is part of the guidelines committee and other people, and I'm sure he's explained very well on the trans-in and trans-out. There's a hand, Singogo.
Yes, we can hear from Moses, then Peter Singogo.
This is Makondo, Benja's Level Hospital in Osaka. I kept dropping off the platform when you're talking about PrEP, but I saw something like the minimum number of days that females are supposed to take the PrEP has been reduced to 7 days. So I just want to find out what's happening. Is it that there's a new drug or yes?
Thank you for that question. Then we can allow Peter Singogo to comment, and then Tasila from Senanga.
Good afternoon, network. Good afternoon, doctor. Our presentation is that of late we had a circular on the second line, AZT3TC, TLOD, in case we had an erratic supply of AZT3TC. We need your guidance in situations where we have, since we do have low numbers of AZT3TC, should we continue or should we maintain transitioning our clients, those who are virally suppressed for a good number of years to TLOD, and those others who are not virally suppressed to TLOD and then atazanava? We need your guidance on that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Tasira? There's a
Good
hand.
afternoon.
Afternoon. Thank you, Tasila.
Yes, my question is, I need a clarification on the long-acting injectable cabotegravir for HIV prevention. In terms of efficacy, you compared it to the oral PrEP. So I just needed a clarification. I think I missed that one slightly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tasila. Maybe we could also allow Bwalia Mwila. Go ahead and make a comment.
Okay, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Yeah, so I'm from Kapirimposhi, and I want to echo on the point. I want to take you back on the trans outs. I think if I can remember, you mentioned that recording of transfer outs can only be done if at all there's confirmation from the facility where they have gone to, if that's correct. Okay, so this one, I think we are having some challenges on this one. Quite all right, it's working, but we have noted a few challenges. Coming from a data perspective, especially when it comes to recording gain and loss, at the end of the monthly reporting period, we have to record those that we have gained and those that we have lost. And the transfer outs come from those that we have lost. Now, if we only be recording transfer outs on basis of confirmation for other facilities, we have clients that one, Dr. Bosco, who actually, I had that point, who said, we have one, we've noted clients that would go to other facilities. You give them 6 months dispensation, and then quite right, they won't go to that facility because they probably have drugs. They only go when the drugs are done. But I think the doc had made it clear on that one that no, we should keep. So I've noted that one. Then the second point I had is that we have people that are migrants. We are talking about truck drivers, business people, and probably people who are shifting. So a number of people have come to us to tell us they are not sure which facility they're going to because where they're going is new. So they've asked us to at least not put a facility, but just leave it in the open. For example, if they're going to Lusaka, they would say, okay, just tell us, just put Lusaka, then I will know which facility will be nearer to where I'm coming from. And then there's also self-transfer. Self-transfer, following suspected loss to follow. There are clients that you might call asking why they haven't come to that pickup, and they're going to tell you that I'm collecting drugs. I've decided that place is too far, and I'm collecting drugs at such a facility. But when you go to follow up at that facility, the facility will actually say that client has not even reached there. So it would mean the client just doesn't want you to locate where they are. But they're taking drugs party, right? But they just don't want you to locate where they are. They'll just take, so we have clients that are on suspension. You know that they're transfer out, but because of such categories, you don't know where they've gone. So where should we capture these clients?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. You sound like but had an experience with that process. Thank you. I'll hand that over to Dr. Sivile.
Yeah, let me start by attending to Mwila. So Mwila, those complexities you've aired are the reasons why we feel this system should be done better. The key is communication. We accept and acknowledge that it's difficult, It's very, very difficult to trace all the patients. Indeed, there will be some that will really won't know where they are. But Dr. Bosco, I think he hurriedly mentioned it. We want to have a master directory for both facilities, patients, if possible, even caregivers, so we know where this patient is, which facility, and so on. So for example, the case that you've given us, if you have good contacts with that patient to say, I do not know where I will go, once the 3 months or 6 months drugs they have, your system is about to, to drop them. You give them a call. You've been out of here for 6 months. You said we gave you a form to report to the facility. Have you reported? Which facility? If they give you the name of the facility, you confirm with that facility. So there's a bit of work. Dr. Bosco used the word be proactive. We need people who are energetic like yourself to push this work, because you also know that currently we do have a lot of patients who are in the air, as you've said, in the suspension. They are transouts, but they've gone, but they've never reached. We do not know. Those who refuse to just say, no, I got drugs at the facility, I think that's an issue of counseling, visitations, and so on, to make sure that that patient is comfortable. Because it's not about receiving drugs, it's all about just the general care as well. We will have an endeavor to look at this issue. We invite some of you from facilities, but after that, we'll have an echo session dedicated to just trans-ins and trans-outs. And how you record these so-called silent transfers. So because that is a big issue, if not the biggest problem that we have as a program. Cabotegravir, long-acting Cabele. So this is an injection that you give for the prevention for HIV, like PrEP. You give it once you give it at day 1, after 1 month, then after that, you give it every 2 monthly. So it's an injection really for somebody who's been on treatment for some time, for 2 monthly, for the prevention of PrEP. When you compare it with oral PrEP, it works 80% better than oral PrEP, than your Truvada. So it's much, much better. In other words, if PrEP was able to prevent 100 patients from getting HIV, if you use Cabele, you prevent 180 patients from getting HIV. So we want that molecule, we want that technology, because it works better. The difficult question of AZT. The good news is that we have AZT now in facility. I know it's a bit of low stock, but our stocks are enough. So the evidence in this area is evolving. There is some evidence, as we discussed prior, that you can recycle these backbone NRTIs and give whatever you want to still work. We are not 100% convinced with that evidence. We'd like to watch it for a longer period of time, see what happens, see what other people are doing elsewhere. So for now, that interim guidance was because we had issues, as you remember, with the AZT, but now we do have enough AZT. It is anticipated that we should have just maybe about 5,000 patients, if less than that, on AZT. So again, if your facility, you find yourself to have too many patients on AZT, ask yourself what you're doing wrong. So those should be very, very few patients who are on AZT. The rest of the patients should have been moved to TLD and other things. So put them on AZT, the standard way, until further guidance, depending on the supply. Yeah, where the supply is tricky, give them that intermediate intervention that we recommended. Why 7 days? This was a recommendation from WHO. I haven't looked at the evidence as to why this was shortened. My guess is it's because with observation and further trial over study over time shows that even in women, you know, who have vaginal sex, the drug levels are sufficient just within 7 days, as opposed to 8 days. I'll check that and give the response why WHO changed it as well. Yeah. So, but that's the change. The change is for both sex, male and female. It should be 7 days. Yeah. So,
Thank you very much. We have been very interactive on this session. Thank you. So many questions here. And I think most of them have been answered. We are at the 16-hour mark when we're supposed to end our session, but a few more, maybe quick questions you might answer. I think one of these is just on the people in the border areas, recipients of care who are difficult to follow up on the border areas. There's a concern here that how can we manage to interlink the healthcare services amongst the countries in the border areas? I think a comment on that one.
Dr. Ziambo, you can comment on that, and you are running the border health for HIV.
So the certain borders do have they're supported by the SADC, and so we have the wellness centers around the border areas that are caring for those that are moving between the borders. And so there actually is some kind of understanding between the two border areas. But we are not yet too sure whether it's actually all the borders. I know some borders may not have this arrangement, and I think it's something that is yet to be taken up and discussed at MOH level. But some borders like Kazungula, Chinji, where in Malawi, they do have such an arrangement. But we do appreciate that there's a challenge in the follow-ups amongst that.
Yeah, so apart from the project that Dr. Ziambo leads in the border areas that is mentioned, other border areas have different projects by different people. So I think you can tell us which border area you are at so that we know who's there. Our understanding is there should be some NGO or project attending to that problem. Maybe they're not just doing it as well as we'd like it to be. Obviously, there are challenges in terms of identifications and so on. That's why at the end of the day, the answers to most of this is to have that master list where we know who's in the system, wherever they are, they can be identified. And for those who have special systems, we can share the records with the other side of the border.
So thank you very much. I hope those responses have satisfied all of us here. I can see there's so many questions here, particularly on transout, and Dr. Bosco is responding. Thank you very much, Dr. Bosco. So I think with that said, we have come to the end of the session. Oh, I've seen a hand from Shangombo. I think we must hear from Shangombo.
It's a border.
And please speak to us.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Nathan Peer from Shangombo District Health Office.
Thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thank you very much. My concern was on the injectable drug for PrEP. From what I've seen so far, from what I've read, is effective against HIV-1. But for us who are in bordering places like Shangombo, we are bordering Angola. You find that most of the clans that we have actually have both HIV-1 and HIV-2, or for the most part, a good fraction of them have HIV-2. So I don't know if there are certain considerations that are being put in place as that drug comes through, it will be able to help us, the people that are on the bordering places like here, because then if the injectable PrEP drug is only effective for HIV-1, then there's a good chance that given the fact that most of the clans that we have, a good number of them have both or HIV-2, meaning it may not be effective against them. So thank you very much. That's my submission.
Very, very interesting information. Thank you very much. Would you like to take that one up, Dr. Sivile?
Sure. Yeah. So for cabotegravir is an INSTI. It's like dolutegravir, should work for both HIV-1 and HIV-2. Obviously, the treatment side where rilpivirine is used, the rilpivirine, it's another story, but I'll need to check the data. I've read, I think, widely on the subject. I haven't come across that particular detail. I think the facts that I have is INSTIs do work for both 1 and 2. And unless there's somebody on the call who has got different, but if you read even the WHO recommendation, the whole document, DHHS recommendation, there's no recommendation that says you should not be done for HIV-2. So maybe it's just to counter check the facts for dolutegravir itself. We can always send you an answer, Nathan from Shangombo.
Any last comments, Dr. Sivile?
Yes, so I think the last comments are Happy New Year. It's nice to see so many people still enthusiastic with the program. We are always thankful for what you guys are doing, gratifying to know people like Nathan from Shangombo connecting to be with us. So let's keep the fire burning, the enthusiasm. I think we all know how far we've gone. The program is okay. I think the indicators are fine. We know where our weaknesses are. Issues of prevention, issues of children. We haven't said much about that today. I hope in the next meeting we'll spend time. Issues of keep up as well. I think those are the issues that we need to be thinking of, how issues of adolescent girls, how we can tackle those. Other things, viral load and the like, are also, I think, of interest. So it's just to urge everybody to keep the momentum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sivile. Thank you very much, those that were with us in here, for being with us. We appreciate. Ndola College of Nursing, Midwifery School. Please, thank you so much for joining us. I can see very enthusiastic. And then the rest of our network, we're happy to reconnect again after the recess. We'll see you next week. We'll be talking about pediatric HIV highlights and 2023 focus areas. See you next week.